Well, hello. Happy Thursday. Welcome, everyone. Thank you for joining us. It is right at the top of the hour, and for once in my life, I'm going to be punctual. We're going to get this party started today. My name is Anissa Avon, and I want to say thank you for being here. And as you begin to hear something that you're like, I'm not so sure about that, or that lady doesn't know what she's talking about, we would love your feedback. So we've done a deep dive into AI governance and digital transformation governance and all of those pieces that we're going to talk about today. But really, you're here to get something out of this, so don't hesitate to hit the chat button and tell us who you are and where you're dialing in from. And I would love to hear what you'd like to get out of your time with us today. And if it fits the topic and we can make it work, or if you just have a comment, we want to include you in this dialogue. So once again, my name is Anissa Avon, and I am the co-founder of peopletransformation.ai. I am joined by our CEO and co-founder, Vivek Mehta. He's also the founder and CEO of Weave AI. And today we're going to dive into what he and I both consider one of the most urgent and probably misunderstood topics in this business transformation, AI revolution world, or should I say whirlwind that we're all living in. So how do we govern AI responsibly at the speed of innovation, right? We all know that AI is transforming business. It's transforming many aspects of our life, even under our nose, right? But as these systems scale faster than most organizations can actually govern them or keep up, we're seeing cracks and they're starting to show. And the problem is it's from, we're seeing the big ones, right? We're seeing self-driving cars that are having to be taken off the line entirely because of fatalities. We're seeing fake news shaking mass markets, right? We're seeing frontline staff struggling to report risks with the real world consequences. And perhaps we'll get into some of those as we begin our dialogue. But where I'd like to start is, what do we mean by governance? Vivek, I've learned so much from your brain around this. So would you share just why does governance matter? What is AI governance? And yeah, why does it matter?
Yeah, absolutely. So I think everyone on the call probably has a basic understanding of governance, but we would kind of define it as the frameworks, the functions, the processes that guide a project to successful delivery. So it kind of defines who makes the decisions, how are those decisions made, how is accountability enforced across a project's life cycle, and how do we ensure adoption and ultimately success. Some of you on the call may know in a previous life, I was a technology consultant. So I was leading large-scale digital transformations, multi-million dollar projects serving hundreds of thousands of users. And I was doing this for multiple clients in multiple industries. And it got to the point where I could tell within week one of a one-year project if that project was going to be successful or not based off of the governance structure. So if the right people weren't in the room, if it was just the head honcho leadership and we didn't have the people, the boots on the ground that were actually going to be the people using a new software or adopting a new process, we knew that we were going to have an uphill road ahead of us. So we'll talk a little bit today about how do you identify who needs to be in the room up front, and how do you make sure that they're continuing to be given the support that they need in order to adopt a change that's going to flip their work life upside down and turn them from people who are skeptical and detractors into people who are champions for this new initiative.
I love this. So the governance happens, what you just said about you could tell within week one, right? Well, in a really effective team, folks are able to speak up in week one, right? Around, hey, we don't have the right voices in the room, or there's folks that we're going to need their input into in order to pull this off, and they have no voice here. What did you see that would have changed that success rate early on?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is first identifying not just who is most passionate or who is higher up in the hierarchy for a particular initiative, but who are the people that everyone else looks to, who are kind of the critical influencers across the organization, and it's usually not or C-level leadership. Usually that's on.
Oops, can you pause for a second and say that again? Because we lost your feed. The audio messed up.
Yeah. I'm not sure where you lost me, but it's important to identify who are the actual influencers in the organization, not just the people that might be sponsoring a project or have the most passion around it, but who are the people that others are listening to. And we're not just looking for those that are going to come in with a lot of support for the new initiative, but people who might be skeptical up front. Those are the people we want in the room from the very top so that we can address those concerns. We understand the communication strategy that's going to be effective with people who are detractors, and when we can roll that out along with the change.
Along with the change. Okay, so in a moment, I'm going to ask you to go a little bit deeper around that piece, identifying those influencers. But can we back up a moment? And, I read a study, I wouldn't call it a study, it was an article, that mentioned that less than half, fewer than half of the organizations that are implementing AI have real oversight, real checks and balances. And when I think about that, if your AI is going to read your receipts and push it into a spreadsheet, okay, how big of a risk is it really, right? All you're doing is making it easier for your accountant to then categorize or whatever that next step is. So I understand that statistic may be off, but here's where I get hung up. There had to have been signals before the Uber's self-driving car hit a pedestrian. There had to be signs from those test drivers, certainly from the people that were in the vehicle, related to, oh, that was a tree. Good thing we missed it. Where were the mechanisms for people in the vehicle? And this is just one example, so I don't mean to pick on Uber. We could take the South Korean robot that literally mistook a human for an object, a box of vegetables, crushed that person. There had to have been moments where other people were like, that robot's acting like our robot. We got a problem. Where are the mechanisms of governance for making sure that human oversight is always in the loop?
Yeah, so I think these kinds of problems really stem from two main places. First is unclear roles and ownership. So people don't necessarily know whose job is it to actually escalate an issue. And it gets compounded when there's miscommunication or gaps between teams that have different levels of buy-in on the transformation that's currently taking place. And so that's when we start falling into stakeholder conflict and politics that then derails the opportunity for escalation to happen. And then the second piece is, of course, are there defined thresholds for escalation? What are the feedback loops that have been put in place to make sure that what's happening on the ground is being funneled back up to the steering committee so that they can take immediate action on it? I often find that these thresholds aren't defined at all. And in cases where they are, sometimes the threshold is far too high in order to justify that escalation, when we should be a little more risk averse when we're dealing with potentially smushing a human.
Yeah. Well, I know that we personally can speak about overreach on escalation, in with people transformations launch inside of learning in the flow of work initiatives. We've had situations where our technology would escalate the wrong word. Oh my goodness, it sounds like you're really struggling. I'm going to tell HR, right? Please don't harm yourself. I mean, that it didn't technically do that, but that was the experience from the user. And this was years ago, but nevertheless, we had this moment of, oh, that was a little too fast of an escalation. We've just lost trust. So when you talk about that, the threshold, sometimes it's too high. It's also sometimes too low. What's the solution, right? For the porridge being just right?
I mean, that's something that's going to depend project by project, but it's kind of understanding what's the impact that is going to be harmful enough that we need to make sure it never happens. So that'll help us define like what the line should be, and we should be more conservative when drawing that line initially. And then we can get the feedback of, okay, maybe we're escalating too much. We don't need to be pushing things back up to our governance group every single time something goes off the rails. Maybe it's only if we're having 10% or higher. That kind of helps us narrow in without bringing up too much risk. And of course, it depends on like, is the project itself going to have an impact that's risky at the end of the day, or is it an impact that we can absorb?
I like that. So whether it's an impact we can absorb. So there's an important distinction there. Fatality versus, oh, my spreadsheet's not working right. Big difference.
Yep.
Do you happen to see the question from Robin? Hi, Robin. McGregor asked us the question, here, let me put it on our screen. How do you identify all those who will be involved and are the unknown stakeholders or who will be significantly impacted at first from the beginning if you don't have process maps in place, for example?
That's a great question and a good segue for us. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here.
Oh, you're going to show some magic. Those
I'm
of
going to
you
do my
who
best.
oh no, it is. Those of you who have not seen organizational network analysis yet, it's mind-blowing what's possible to identify in such a succinct and clear way regarding influencers, hidden champions, those who might have one foot out the door, detractors. So it's a little bit of magic he's about to show you.
Let me just make sure I've got permissions to share here. All right. So I first kind of want to start with like, what are the reasons why we see most large-scale transformations fail before go live? And it's kind of what I call vibes-based governance, where the people that are in the room are just the people that we kind of feel are most important. Oftentimes, this is just by hierarchy. Many times when we're going to an organization for a transformation like this, we've mostly just got C-level folks and directors and VPs that are in the room. And so we're missing out on critical voices, oftentimes the very voices whose buy-in is going to make or break the rollout. There are influential gatekeepers, people who might detract and bring down the initiative that are going unidentified. And if we roll out an initiative without identifying these people up front, their resistance is going to grow beneath the surface unaddressed. It's going to spread among the populace and become that much harder to bring up adoption. And ultimately, this is what snowballs into schedule slipping, into costs running away. And oftentimes, this momentum that is among the most passionate people that are kind of driving this project gets derailed before we've even launched. So let's talk a little bit about Robin's question. How do we actually know who these people are? And oftentimes we are looking at organizations through this view, the formal org chart, the official hierarchy, and it's very difficult from this view to identify the actual dynamics inside an organization of influence and adoption and resistance. This is what organizations actually look like. So this is a map indicating the trust networks, the communication networks, the mentorship networks, productivity, emotional support, et cetera. These are the various dynamics that determine whether organizational initiatives are successful or doomed to fail. It is the structural map that tells us how hard it's going to be to roll out a new change. So I'm going to hop over here into a live version of this map. And what you're looking at, each one of these bubbles here represents a specific individual. The larger and more connected the individual, the higher influence they have in the organization, and oftentimes the higher up the org chart that they might be. So in this case, this is our CEO, this is one of our directors, this is one of our VPs. And when this organization was working to do a large process change across their organization, they were looking to kind of stem severe employee turnover and improve employee engagement and morale. These three were, of course, in the room, as it makes sense. But they were the only three people in the room. And what we find is, even though these individuals were really strong leaders, they were pretty trusted, they had a lot of people that looked up to them, their influence didn't reach to all ends of the organization. So I'm going to show you here. We're now looking at the colored dots are who the CEO has influence over, meaning through connections of connections. If a message comes down from the CEO, these are the people that are going to hear it. However, we can see that over half the organization is unrepresented. And these are people that if we don't bring more folks into our steering committee to represent them, they're never going to adopt a change that we roll out. One, they're not going to hear the message. Two, they're not going to trust where it's coming from when it finally does impact their day-to-day. And three, this is resistance that these three folks are not going to be seeing. So the first step in this case is identifying who are the people that are on the outskirts of our CEO's network. So this is a fairly strong leader to begin with. It's not always the case, but this is somebody that is trusted by a large percent of the organization. He's got folks at the edge of his network that currently are not holding the influence that they necessarily should. And so what we need to do is bring these folks into the room, increase the amount of influence that they have across these unseen parts of the organization. And then rather than hitting 2 to 3 degrees deep, now we can hit the entire 10 degrees deep to all edges of this company.
So I'm going to pause you for just a second and say, everything that you're saying is one of those, yeah, we would love to bring everyone into the room, but I don't know a single CEO that's going to be like, sure, let's have one more big company meeting, or I'll send out a memo. That's going to work. It's human nature to be like, we can't do this. We can't get everyone's opinion. This is not, a company run by, committee. We got to make decisions. So what exactly are you talking about when you say we need to bring them into the fold? How do you do that?
Yeah, so there's kind of like a delineation between who are the people that are like actually on your steering committee, the ones that are making decisions from the top, and who are the champions that you need buy-in from that are going to be the people that are helping adoption on the ground. And those are not necessarily the same groups of people that need to be meeting together every time. So our CEO doesn't necessarily need to be in 50 meetings a week to make sure that this initiative is successful. Our group here might be sitting and handling those escalation decisions. They're the ones that are kind of selecting who are the folks that are going to be making the day-to-day decisions. But then when we are looking at that day-to-day, let's take an example here. We have a department here in green and a few folks in pink. And the only way that they are connected back into the CEO sphere of influence is through these two folks here. And so if we want this team to be on board with our new process, with our new technology, we need one of these two folks to be bought in as a champion. I'm not sure if that completely answered your question, Isa, but it's kind of delineating who sits where.
So it's who sits where, who needs to be brought in, and who needs to get on board, with the process. At some point here in the next few minutes, I suspect you'll also be saying, well, how do we leverage communications at scale to do the work that normally would require me knocking on someone's door and saying, I'm bringing you coffee. Can we have a chat about this new initiative? Because I need you on board. That's not scalable. But with conversational AI, we can make it. So, okay, good deal.
Perfect. So let me hop back over here. Once we have this view of an organization, now we are identifying upfront who are our people that have influence, who are the people that might be our resistors, and who are the people that we need to have in the room. So this is an example here from a recent client of ours, a hospital that we were working with, where we found that there was a frontline nurse, somebody not in a leadership position, that was strongly trusted by 22 of his team members as a mentor and a knowledge source. And this is somebody that has unique influence over detractors who might otherwise resist change. So we're looking across the entire organization, identifying who are the hidden influencers, people who are kind of shaping decision-making behind the scenes that it's not typically seen on the org chart? Who are your trusted champions whose buy-in you need to accelerate adoption? Who are your detractors that you have to address their concerns early? And who are your critical connectors? So who are the people that are enabling collaboration across teams that are going to ultimately be the glue that allows for a successful transformation? And I'll just quickly show you an example of what one of those looks like. So this is a pretty good example here. This is somebody who doesn't necessarily have a lot of influence across the organization. You can tell that by the size of their bubble here, but they are connected to quite a few teams in various places. And so this is somebody who we call them a broker. Knowledge and trust flows through them when connecting different teams. And so we want to also make sure to identify these very important individuals, because they're going to be what takes our pilot rollout and makes it into a successful organization-wide adoption. All right, so let me talk a little bit about our approach to this. Whether you use a solution like ours or not, this kind of methodology is what we believe is critical to successful transformations. So the first piece we think is extremely important is understanding the true organizational network. What are the actual spheres of network influence? The way that we do that is through a simple 5 to 10 minute survey with staff that helps us build out a network map like this. For those that are interested, we're happy to hop on a call and tell you more about how exactly that happens. From that data, we can tell you at the top of your governance cycle, who needs to be in the room. And then who are the champions we need to activate? Who are the connectors we have to ensure have the right support? Who are the detractors that we need to overcome? And in a second here, I'll come to the point that Anissa just made, which is how do you actually activate champions and provide support at scale? So while I'm hopping over there, let me just check and see if we had any other questions come in.
Way too many Anissas. Whew. God. We do have a couple of other questions. I'd love for you to take us one step deeper into the activation piece, and then I'd like to come back to Radicanto. Sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name.
Radicanto's got a pretty deep question around preventing AI attacks.
I think it's just brilliant, and I know that all of us are experiencing heightened concern about AI attacks. So this is a perfect opportunity for us to explore a little bit of that. But will you first go back to that? How do you activate at scale? So I love what you shared is governance success has to start with the right people in the room and the right voices, and people have to weigh in to buy in. They also need to have a psychologically safe place to provide ongoing feedback, right? There needs to be a mechanism to escalate issues when the AI is off. And as much as I am an AI obsessed fan, I don't believe there will be a time when AI can replace our human hunches, those nuance the nuance of knowledge that comes from depth of life lived. It will be a long time before AI can replace that piece of us. And I think there has to be a mechanism to scale, to facilitate input. What are you guys seeing on the ground? How is it working? You're not liking it? Tell me why. What would you like for it to do different? And then scale that into an insights engine that those who can take action on it can actually filter it. I mean, right now, all of us are just drowning in a sea of insights. We were all excited because we've got these big dashboards, but now we don't know what to do with them. So we don't even log into them anymore. Raise your hand if any of us have ever, never mind. I don't want to see it. So sorry, I'm going off on a couple of tangents, but I think it's important that we understand how to leverage technology in order to scale, facilitate those conversations and feedback and responses to the input.
Yeah, that's a great question. And we have a pretty opinionated view on what AI can scale and automate and what has to always remain something that's human expertise. And we think any kind of large scale people transformation requires trusted people in order to champion and lead that change and be the origination of a message. People hear it from someone they trust first. But we also know with how much we're inundated with every day, this is a marketing stat where we find that it applies even more inside of organizations. But we have to hear a message upwards of 27 times in order for us to actually retain it and be able to apply it. And that is something which is missed when we go through traditional approaches, which is you might have a big kickoff meeting and then you might just have an email campaign to try to get people to adopt, let's say, a new technology.
And in all fairness, that's all we could do, right? We were at capacity at trying to get to 10, let alone 27. So, yeah.
Yeah. So exactly to that point, we still kick off with a trusted human. We still make sure that we have those touch points over time, but the in between and getting to those 27 repeated messages so that somebody can actually change their day-to-day behavior, that's something that AI can automate.
Oh, do tell me more. AI can automate that. Sorry, I'm being facetious because I know the answer. It's something that we're pretty passionate about, but I do think here. Let me give you.
Let me go ahead and share my screen again here.
Okay, there you go.
So I'm going to take you through a use case, a specific case study where we ran a network analysis. We understood that there was a decent amount of people that were going to be detractors, that were disconnected from the core messages that were going to come from the top. They're people that either were not going to adopt a change without a lot of effort, or they're people that are actively going to resist it. But the reason why they might not adopt or resist could be different for each one of those individuals. And traditionally speaking, it would be pretty difficult for us to simultaneously address somebody that is burnt out, a team that's breaking into silos, people that have tensions with their managers all at the same time. But that is where Kim, our AI change agent, comes in, who can give your leaders 100 more hours in the day and start giving that personalized support to each individual. And we see this in the governance world kind of play out in a few different use cases. So the first is in supporting adherence to a new process. And this is as simple as there's a change in someone's workflow. They need to ask a question around how to do something new. And that's something that AI can very, very easily handle. I'm sure most of us on the call have already experienced this use case through a ChatGPT or Claude or Gemini or something. And in this case, this case study is for a hospital that rolled out Epic, a electronic health record system. And so it's kind of a flip of everything that providers were doing day to day. They kind of had to learn within the new system. The second area where we think this starts to get much more intelligent than you just kind of reaching out to a AI LLM by yourself is having personalized nudges and personalized support. So in this case, we had providers who were requesting specific reminders. So in this case, when patient volume was high, they needed to make sure to double check orders before they sent off samples over to the lab. This is something that kind of in the heat of a busy shift would be something that would be easily slipped, but it's something that the AI can pretty seamlessly keep track of and provide that nudge at the point in time where it's actually going to make a difference. And this last piece I kind of want to talk about is how do we actually expand the bandwidth of your people leaders? So these are the individuals that are very often your champions. These are the people that need to support the adoption of a change within their teams, but oftentimes they're already overrun with their day-to-day job. How do we add on this additional piece of now we're transforming your employees' day-to-day experience with a new process or new technology, and you have to support that as well. So the first piece we found is kind of what Anissa was hinting at, which is we are kind of past the days of people taking time to read through dashboards and pages of like insights and reports and results data. And what we found to be quite successful is instead Kim here has had a conversation with everybody on this particular people leaders team. Um, and she's identified that there is a specific actionable issue that this leader needs to pay attention to, which in this case is that Zone B is having trouble during busy shifts for their intake assessments. And so this is, I don't have to log in. As a people leader, I get a message that's very honed in on the specific item that I need to prioritize. So rather than having 15 new things added to my to-do list that are never going to get done, it's here's the one thing that is going to make the biggest difference for your team. And of course, we find that not every leader is going to have the capability to see, okay, here's an area where I need to act. Here's exactly what I need to do about it. This is where we can start to provide real-time coaching to help nudge people towards solving problems on their own. And you'll kind of see in this interaction, and for those that have seen more of our live demos, that we're very careful in how Kim communicates with staff. We're not just giving somebody the answer. Instead, we are coaching somebody to reach a solution themselves so that they're increasing their own competency over time.
This is really good. I want to share some of the studies around AI nudges and what the data says. Oftentimes we'll get, but those are just like those reminders on your phone. I ignore my alarm and I ignore those reminders that say, hey, do 100 sit-ups or whatever they are. And that's true. Some of us are going to ignore them. But the fact is that these AI-enabled nudges are actually already showing, it was a McKinsey report that showed in operational settings, nudges increase productivity up to 10%, somewhere between 8 and 10%. And reduced rework by 20 to 30%. I mean, if you put that in numbers, that equates to millions in certain organizations and certainly in aggregate. And then what we also found in our own experiences is that when those nudges are turned into coaching moments, folks take whatever that knowledge was, that subject matter, and take it deeper. It's like a mini simulation. There's a difference between a keynote where you're like, that was motivating. What did you learn? I don't know, but it was great. Right. And actually taking time to get your hands in the mix. Well, an AI coaching can do that. You can have a role play. You can ask questions of it. You can simulate how it applies to you in a real world setting. How does that translate to governance? How does the ability for artificial intelligence, and in this case, you've been talking about conversational AI, facilitate input to enable those who can make decisions to stop the launch, so to speak, to leave it on the platform before you light the fire, if in case it's going to be a catastrophe. So, and that's the extreme case. We still lose a lot of money when, who was it, Air Canada, whose AI shared a false bereavement policy. They got sued. I don't remember what the numbers were, but it was bad. It was bad for their reputation. So sorry, that's a long-winded question to say exactly how does conversational AI facilitate a psychologically safe space so that whistleblowers and others can actually put in their feedback about what's not working and the alarms that people should be seeing.
Yeah, I think this is a good time to talk about what I think is the second biggest problem organizations face with governance. So the first being, we don't even have the right people in the room to begin with. But for the organizations that do have the right people in the room, or that kind of launch regardless, the second biggest issue I see is that the governance model does not evolve as the project evolves. So it stays pretty stagnant. And so what might have worked for pre-launch is not what's going to work a year down the line for wide-scale rollout and adoption. What we found is there are kind of like three, broadly speaking, levels of an organization in which change needs to be happening pretty rapidly for a large-scale transformation to be successful. So the first is employees on the ground who are having their day-to-day flipped upside down by a new process or a new technology. These are people that need to have very, very fast feedback loops, where if they hit an issue, they need to have that issue resolved pretty instantly. if we are noticing a trend of the same issue being hit across many people on the ground, now we know that this is maybe something more structural that needs to be addressed by the governance committee. So that's something that kind of triggers an escalation to go upwards. The second level is more of your frontline managers, your people leaders, your champions. And so these are the people that need to have very, very tight feedback loops between the issues that their teams are seeing and the issues that they are able to remove the roadblocks for. And again, if we are seeing issues where our middle level is not able to remove those roadblocks, then that is a governance problem where maybe they've not been given the right training. Maybe we've not spent enough time in getting buy-in from those that have to be our champions. And then the third level is really that governance committee, the steering committee that needs to be making more of the top-down decisions. And the issue that we find there is the feedback loop tends to be pretty haphazard. So sometimes there's somebody on the governance committee that like really cares about a particular metric, and so they're watching the dashboard every day for that. Other people might be on the ground talking to folks and getting a partial kind of anecdotal opinion of what's going on. But a lot of the time, I find that there's a complete disconnect between the steering committee and the experiences of folks in their day-to-day. And so to make sure that the governance committee is actually continuing to adapt to change across a project timeline, there needs to be a loop that's taking the feedback from employees at the bottom and on a regular basis, pulling it up to the top so that one, decisions can be made that are going to help make the lives of our frontline staff or our champions easier. And two, we might find as we go forward that there are additional folks that maybe we need to pull into the steering committee, maybe folks that no longer need to be sitting in every one of those meetings. And a really simple example for this is if we've expanded a rollout from a initial pilot department into organization-wide, now we need additional people in our governance committee that represent those other parts of the organization. That's the simplest example, but we find many, many different variants of this based off of what are the challenges that people are facing repeatedly? What's the specific ROI that we want with this change? And who are the folks that are going to own that bottom line metric that can continue to adopt over time, and how we govern the project needs to adopt with that.
Okay, that was a lot. But I think that there's a thread here that we can pull into address Radhikana's Nanda's question. And I want to start with the question. The question is, and I'm not going to show it on our screen but we'll go into the question. How do we educate and prevent AI attacks? These are real issues, for example, that we're talking about. Fake medical equipment shipment billed to Medicare, impersonators enrolling people, fake billing surprises, data breaches. So one of the things that you said early on was about just AI literacy. And I think we can start there, right? We have to build AI literacy across our organizations. We have to train all employees. And this is not just an IT initiative. This is every leader, every employee has to know how AI scams work, including phishing, deep fakes, impersonations, fake billing, data breaches. There needs to be almost a blockchain recognition on data that only the organization holds the key to, so to speak, in some cases when it comes to money. I think it's essential to train our folks on real world examples, because it's really hard for me to go, watch out for phishing or watch out for fake billing, unless I have some grounded visuals to work with. And so every organization needs to have someone that's in charge of collecting those and educating. And then finally, I think one of the things that you've talked about is getting that feedback and getting it into a loop at scale. We have to make it really, really easy and safe for everyone, frontline staff included, to report suspected fraud, suspected billing anomalies or data breaches or things that they've heard of or have concerns about. And then we would be overwhelmed if we encouraged everyone to knock on our door, which is why you have to have a technology that can aggregate it and spot the patterns. We don't want one issue to escalate to the top and be a false flag. We really do need the technology to be a trim tab for us. What are the trends that are rising that we need to prioritize in education and proactive resolution? Can you speak to some of the next pieces of this? What exactly is a robust security control to prevent some of these AI attacks?
Yeah, well, I mean, Ratikanta is actually more of an expert here than I am, but I can kind of speak to what I've been seeing a decent amount, and it's a lot of uh, people being cavalier and honestly a bit stupid with how they roll out AI initiatives. I can't speak to the case if any of this happened at BSW, but I've seen this at organizations large enough to know better, where they are rolling out AI functionality, AI agents that have tool access that can write to the database that they are not doing simple input sanitization for. And so it's easy for definitely malicious actors to push something through. But even innocent users that are kind of coming in, they can accidentally end up prompting the AI to do something that was not expected and could have harmful consequences down the line. So the basic piece is there kind of needs to be an understanding of what should this AI absolutely not be allowed to do. What are the areas where what it can be allowed to do could be taken advantage of, and making sure that we're building sanitization around it. I think for a lot of these issues, it comes down to what Nisa was talking about, which was AI literacy. As kind of the technology is getting more and more democratized, we're seeing AI applications spin up from less and less technical folks, which we think is great in terms of like providing value in the hands of people that wouldn't have been able to accomplish it a couple of years ago. But it is critical that they understand not just the power of AI solutions, but how to properly secure them. And in some cases, the state of the technology is not where we can 100% safely secure something. I can't speak to a specific example, but we probably don't want AI agents messing around with Medicare billing.
Yeah. Thinking not. Can you talk a little bit about using AI defensively? So I know that we can, for example, peopletransformation.ai does AI literacy in the flow of work, right? And it will take an organization's things to watch out for and how to escalate them and the process for that and how to give us confidential feedback, right? All of that in the flow of work, 3 to 5 minutes, a couple of times a month max, right? But what I am not clear about is how companies can leverage AI to enable checking ahead of time these AI attacks or being more defensive. Can you speak to that?
Yeah, I mean, partially, I'd say like AI's role should more be kind of educational in this space, not really like in implementing some of these security safeguards. I think it's also understanding when do we need input from which team members. For example, I've seen in quite a few businesses recently that I can't drop the name of, but they are launching AI-based products to production. Sometimes it's things that are meant to entirely be internal tools, but they're available on the open web, and they haven't gone through the standard security processes. And many times at these kinds of organizations, there are very standardized processes for how to launch new products that are being circumvented in this AI hype wave of, at the same time, you're getting message from your leadership saying every single team needs to roll out AI initiatives this year. And also the technology can have pretty major gaps in it if we're not following our standard processes. So I'd say part of like where AI comes in is ensuring that whatever process like the governance committee has set for these kinds of AI initiatives is followed and mandated every single time. I've got a lot of thoughts on how that can roll out for a specific project, but I won't get too into the weeds right now.
So that's very helpful. And Robin asked, does the ISACA, or that global organization that focuses on advancing trust in technology and what have you, do they have new protocols on this?
I'm not sure off the top of my head, but I would not be surprised at all if they've got a certification program around it. I've seen the protocols that people are following more to kind of be from like AWS's best practice standards framework. There are kind of new approaches to how I've seen SOC audits being done to handle this. At the same time, I'm seeing like database providers, for example, are making it easier and easier for agents to automatically make updates. So I have a friend of a colleague who they have agents that are creating 10 times the amount of databases in the organization than humans are. And they're automatically doing read writes. They have pretty standardized protocols to address this kind of thing, but they just haven't followed the process in the hype of moving fast.
So my novice takeaway is that there are audit trails, there are maybe even audit toolkits that organizations should be using to control for, detect for, prevent fraud, misuse, unethical returns in AI, et cetera.
That's right. Kind of to Robin's point, actually, right after this call, I'm going to go and check to see if there's any standards that we can recommend that folks are following. But at the very least, there needs to be a team whose job it is to make the decision around what protocols and standards have to be followed, and then mandating that that's something that every team across the organization is following. And similar to any other kind of change management and people transformation, getting people to follow a new process and protocol like that requires change management with that many of the strategies we talked about on this call can apply to.
Agreed. I think for me, my biggest takeaway is what I started with, which I think that most of us don't know what we don't know when it comes to the dangers that we're setting ourselves up for. It's kind of like I have a relative. He's really close. In fact, I just married him recently. I shouldn't say this out loud, but he doesn't take simple things like password protection seriously. And I think that same kind of mindset, that same kind of mindset transfers into large organizations, setting them up for really bad brand altering issues that include breaches, companies, bad actors holding companies hostage, losing employees, et cetera. So I think that one of my biggest takeaways from what you shared today is just making sure that the right people in the room are in the room, that the right voices are contributing to the initiative, to how it's going to roll out and what it's going to produce for the organization. But then after all that is said and done, there is an iterative process of governance. It's not a once and done. It's not a set it and walk free. It is a constant process of governance and oversight. And that's got to have a layer of human oversight.
Yeah, I think that's a critical point, understanding what we can safely scale and what we can't. With how fast underlying technology is moving in this space, the delineation between those two areas is kind of shifting pretty rapidly. But I'd say, kind of coming back around to some of Rithikanta's questions, I wonder in how many of those flows do they actually have proper human in the loop Where do they have escalation thresholds? Were they things where somebody could only spot an issue after it had already happened, or were they taking the cost hit of having a person up front that could catch some of these things? When we're talking organizations around AI usage, it's very, very important to understand what can be scaled, what can be safely scaled, and what are the areas where we can still get 90% of the value, but significantly more security by taking that extra step.
Yeah, very good. If we were to wrap up with, if an organization were to just do one thing in order to shore up its governance model, what would you suggest?
I'd say the biggest thing is understanding the true influencer network. Who are the people that have to be in the room? Who are the champions that you need to have the buy-in from? Who are the detractors whose issues and concerns you have to understand and address upfront? Who are the connectors that are going to help you get to large-scale adoption? That is, we luckily have a pretty easy way to identify all four of those types of people across an entire organization. This is something that you can identify in person just through a lot of on-the-ground conversations, interviewing, spending time within teams. But if you don't have time to do all of that, we do have a technology that can do it.
Love it. Thank you so much, Vivek. And thank you everyone for joining us today. You can tell we're a bit nerds when it comes to this whole conversation, so we appreciate you spending your lunch hour with us. We would love the opportunity to support you and your organization, have a conversation, see if we can't collaborate in some way. You see on the screen, there is a QR code that takes you right to our calendar to schedule a strategy call. Feel free to get in touch with us. Vivek can be reached at Vivek@weave.ai, and that's 2 E's, WEEVE.ai. And I can be reached at Anisa@peopletransformation.ai. So thank you again, everyone. And Vivek, as always, I appreciate the education.
Thank you all.
Bye, everyone.